Hi everybody, my name is Sally Ann Williams. I am the CEO of Cicada Innovations. Welcome to our panel today on Manufacturing 4.0. Before we get underway, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which, or the many lands on which we're meeting today. In the spirit of reconciliation, Cicada Innovations acknowledges traditional custodians of our country throughout the lands now known as Australia, and we acknowledge their connections to land, sea and community and pay our respect to elders past and present. And we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today or watching this later on our video. So I'm excited to have this conversation today about Manufacturing 4.0 and bust some myths about what manufacturing is, what it was and what it is today, but a little bit about Cicada Innovations. So Cicada Innovations is Australia's pioneering deep tech incubator. We work with about 40 to 60 companies, resident companies at any given time here in Sydney, and we support them in their growth all the way from their first science and engineering idea through to full actually on-site manufacturing and bringing their science and engineering solutions to the world in health tech, in agriculture, in food, environment, energy, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, modern slavery. All of our companies are trying to solve really big challenges and to bring solutions to market that have a big and positive impact on society, as well as building businesses and opportunities for people here and globally as they expand. So today I'm really excited about this panel. We've got some amazing panelists joining us today. So we have Colin Denver, who's the CEO of one of our resident companies, SpeeDx. And Colin is joining us from home, but on site, just down here from me, I can see where his team is actually doing some manufacturing. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that today. We've got the fabulous Sarah Pearson, who's the Deputy Director General of the Department of Innovations, Tourism and Industry Development in Queensland. And Sarah I've known for many years and has had a host of roles in innovation and science and engineering, and is going to be able to share with us both a perspective from her current role, but also I think from that history about the opportunities for Australia. And last but certainly not least, the fantastic Corey Stewart, who is the CEO of the Advanced Robotics and Manufacturing Hub, or ARM. And, you know, it's really great to be able to have Corey join us and talk about the work that they're doing, but also what they're seeing and what they're seeing emerge and emerging now and what the opportunity is now, but also I think the opportunity in the future. So panelists, thank you so much for joining us. We will kick off with some questions right in a second. A little bit of housekeeping for those of you watching. When we registered, we asked you for some questions, and we've used some of those questions to guide the initial framing of this conversation and the first sort of few kickoff questions, but we will hopefully have some time to answer some more questions throughout the session. So please use the Q&A function below in Zoom and ask your questions there, and, you know, vote up and like the ones that you think are really important and that you want to ask the panel, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. We probably won't be able to get to all of them, but I do know that all of your panel or the organizations that they are a part of are on Twitter and LinkedIn, so feel free to hit them up on Twitter, and I'm sure they'll be able to point you in the direction of some fantastic resources and things that they mentioned today on our webinar. So the big burning question, or what I like to talk about, you know, is what on earth are we talking about when we talk about Manufacturing 4.0? Most people, when I say to them manufacturing, they have the immediate mental imagery is a car assembly line, it's a large scale plant, it's something like that. But really what we're talking about is something a little bit different. So tell me, what does Manufacturing 4.0 look like for you? And Colin, you are manufacturing, so maybe I'll start with you, and then I'll let Sarah and Corey decide who wants to jump in and expand on that.
No, thanks, Sally. And yeah, to say we are actually manufacturing, we're producing products, as Sally mentioned, in central Sydney. So just to give you an idea, it is actually Redfern, which is about 2 kilometers from the CBD. And when you think about, I think from our side, traditional manufacturing in the sense of sort of the car industry, we're pretty much nothing like that. So we have managed to, I guess, condense the activities that we need to do into very small spaces using I guess, technology and contract manufacturing as real tools as we move forward. Now, it hasn't stopped us from increasing the amount of people that we have involved in manufacturing. Quite the opposite. Just to give you an indication, we started the year before. All right, we started this year with 67 staff in January, and we just hired our 83rd person right now. So what we've seen is a need and an ability to adapt what we can do, obviously given massive constraints with supply chain, massive constraints with
What do you do, Colin?
sorry. So we're a molecular diagnostics company. So if you guys have heard of PCR in the news, so most of the coronavirus testing that's occurring right now is via PCR. That's our core technology. So we have novel detection technology that we've applied into PCR, and just a little sort of a teaser. We're just about to launch our first coronavirus test, and something that's going to be pretty revolutionary in the way that coronavirus and other viral infections are treated. So to say that we've had a massive increase in the demand for our product is probably a huge understatement. So we've had to look at other ways to adapt.
Awesome. Corey, I'm going to throw to you because you've got a great backdrop there, because it's kind of visually what I would think about when I think traditional manufacturing. So bust a bit of a myth open for us. What does manufacturing 4.0 look like, and what does that really mean for you?
Yeah, on a day-to-day way for us, it's really about bringing all that digital connectivity to manufacturing. So it can be very small and scalable, and it can be quite large and industrial. And you'll see behind me, this is one of our Arm Hub sites. It's called the Learning Factory, where we do work with a range of scale of businesses trying to do innovation and basically get that digital connectivity opportunity happening through their business. But really, I think what our touch point really happens, because we're very focused on robotics, but not only robotics, but mainly robotics, is that as companies and demand is becoming more personalized, when we're manufacturing, we're needing to become smarter and smarter at doing it to lower the costs and get that really high value product out into the market and into global markets. So we're seeing a lot of personalization. So and we're seeing a lot of mass customization as well. So again, it's that sort of demand for the unique and the one-off or the small series of manufacturing. So it's not really this kind of large mass customized, mass productized floor manufacturing. We're seeing a little bit in the car industry, although the car industry is also very good at mass customization these days. So that's what we are working with. But also we're working with some companies that are looking to really adopt. They might be traditional, going into adoption and seeing what values that is bringing to their business, and they're quite substantial, like small adoption starting points, whether it's AR, VR or robotics, can get you great wins. But we're also having a lot of companies wanting to just start at deep tech, high tech companies manufacturing. So it's a good start.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sarah, you've got a very broad remit and a very sort of broad portfolio of areas you see. When I say manufacturing 4.0 to you, what's the image that now springs to mind?
So for me, it's actually threefold. The first one is traditional manufacturing, but better. So enhancing current manufacturing. And that's going to be increasingly important as we want to onshore our supply chains, and we want to have sovereign ownership of those supply chains. If we're going to be globally competitive, we've got to do it more productively. So traditional manufacturing, but better. And some examples of that would be, for instance, in Queensland, we've got this company called Movus that has a product called Fit Machine, which has a bunch of sensors on your manufacturing line, which measures vibrations, uses machine learning to understand what those vibrations mean in terms of whether you need to mend that bit or take that bit out and put a new bit in. So it's actually trying to really enhance the productivity of traditional manufacturing. The next one, I think, is actually completely new manufacturing processes. So for instance, you can genetically modify yeast to get it to produce gelatin, other food ingredients, as well as a whole lot of other chemicals. That's a whole new chemical plant, a whole new way of doing our manufacturing. So I see manufacturing 4.0 is encompassing that too. And then I like to extend it to advanced products. So an example I wanted to give here was some smart technology that Verton Australia have that look at using IoT on your rotators and cranes. So you've got your building site, you've got your crane. Normally you've got people with ropes doing bits and pieces, but this piece of technology uses sensors and IoT to do this more safely, and you have to manufacture that in a very different way. So three-pronged for me.
Yeah. I love it. So this is really good. I think I've seen a lot of manufacturing panels recently, and everyone talks at a high level about, you know, automation, and they talk about jobs, but we don't kind of unpack what we're seeing emerging in Australia and actually paint the picture and kind of give that storytelling of this is what it could look like, and what those jobs and what those opportunities are, both now and in the future. So I think I want to dig into this a little bit before we do get into jobs. You all have visual oversight of things that you're seeing emerging, either in your own organisations, Colin, or, you know, with the companies that you're working with, Corey and Sarah. Beyond that, if you were to unpack and sort of say which particular strengths do we have in Australia that you're seeing really emerge in the manufacturing sector, are there particular things that you're saying, you know, this is what we're really good on, and we really need to make sure that we're supporting it both from a, you know, from a policy perspective, from a funding perspective, from a skills perspective? Are there particular verticals that you see? And I'll throw that open. Anybody can answer that one.
Okay, I'll jump in. First of all, I want to say, this onshoring piece I talked about, that's just what we've got to do. And I know that, you know, we've got some strong expertise in terms of robotics, and I know the Arm Hub is absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to steal Corey's thunder, let her talk about all that. So what we're doing there is very important. I think future food, you know, Australia is well known as a food producer. We're very fortunate. We produce most of our food. But future food is going to be fascinating. And yeah, obviously COVID-19 is going to have a massive impact in that for a range of reasons. But people are going to want clean food and good food, and we've got a lot of that. But the future food piece will be interesting. I talked about, you know, changing yeast. That's going to need a lot of sugar. Australia's got a bucket load of sugar. We have got such a fantastic value proposition around generating those new foods and chemicals there. I think we've shown, but others have too, on the PPE side of things. What's been really great is to see, you know, nationally, our manufacturers pivoting to be able to generate PPE. Isn't it great we pivoted so quickly? So I think that's a strength that Australia has. We can. We probably didn't think we could, but we did, so we can. And that speaks also to Corey's point about, you know, personalised manufacturing and smaller batches and things like that. Circular economy. I think Australia has got some strength in circular economy. We've got the brand that goes with it too. So how do we really push that in terms of our future manufacturing? Ag tech is a no-brainer. You know, we've got a lot of ag, and we have a lot of challenges around agriculture, distance. So, you know, IoT comes into all of that, as well as lack of water. You know, we can take some real leadership on a manufacturing of the sorts of technologies we need around ag tech. Space. I do love space. And we have got some phenomenal people working in space, and we do geographically have a unique position in terms of space. I think in terms of manufacturing around space, there's opportunities. And I'd like to point out that there's also opportunities for current manufacturing in these future industries. So it was interesting talking to the Gilmore brothers down at the Gold Coast about the work that they're doing around you know, rockets. They were saying they need panel beaters, they need electricians, you know, so it's not like it's this frightening new thing where people have got skills now, don't have them for the future. We need people with the skills now in those future. Defense, another obvious one. Mining equipment and technology, you know, we're really big on mining. There's a load of like autonomous vehicles in mining, a lot of great opportunity there. And then I've talked about the biomanufacturing, which is beyond food. So I think we've got plenty of opportunities in Australia in this space.
Yeah, I agree. I will pop up, and then sorry, Colin, then I'll give you some airtime too. I think what was great about what Sarah has said is that you know, we managed it with COVID, and I think we're really demonstrating the people that we're, you know, working with every day is that we can pivot, we can make things happen. What we've demonstrated is the capability to have an agile manufacturing industry with new capabilities, high-tech capabilities. This is really important. No one can predict the future. No one knows how long COVID's here for. No one knows what our export markets is exactly going to look like. But we are now starting all these supply chains around essential medical equipment. I'm not so concerned at the fact that it's essential medical equipment. That's great for now. But what we have done is we've built a workforce that can use those skills in any kind of manufacturing and probably a higher tech kind of environment going forward, and understand what the capabilities are for transfer. And so we can transfer those skills. So we really just need to invest. There's been concern around what the business model will be for these companies going into this space. The point is, yep, they're building the workforce. They'll be able to manufacture many things into the future, and that will build a kind of an Australian capability in and of itself. And again, like Sarah said, we've got a lot of comparative advantages. We've got big distance for space. We've got deep, long connections into mining and the met sector. We've got so many exciting METS companies. We just need to make sure they're the competitive advantages that we're taking forward. And obviously medical and life sciences. So Colin's really in a square space. We've invested as a nation for so long, and now we do have excellence. We've taken medtech to the world. I think it's time now Australia really takes, the METS companies and the mining capability you have to the world. We take our agri-tech to the world. And well, look, I'm really excited to see what might happen in space. I think we're really, as a nation, really, taking that challenge on straight ahead. So I think that's the main things for me. And the other thing is around the fact that we have SMEs. We really need to put the SMEs at the heart of what we think about when we think about manufacturing future. So it's micro, small companies and SMEs that are going to be the ones that are able to absorb and take forward a really robust manufacturing capability. And manufacturing is horizontal in the way that I think about robotics is horizontal. So it is the backbone for every industry sector. So we need to keep telling that story about manufacturing not being only about big industrial sheds and dirty work, but being really about smart industry.
Yeah, and clean rooms like, Colin and that have.
Yeah.
Colin, I'd love you to expand on this a little bit more, because I think SpeeDx is a really interesting story, right? You guys are just over 10 years old, coming up to 11 years. You started with one technology in the diagnostic space and the therapeutic space, but you've got a platform that can be, extrapolated on and things be built upon on. So could you unpack that a little bit more, and like in non-med tech terms, for those of us who don't come from a medical device background, what that really means and what that enabling factor is? Because in my year of knowing, the company, I've seen you go from strength to strength and add on so many layers of new products and services. And when we talk about advanced manufacturing, we talk about manufacturing and getting it right. If that underlying technology is solid, the opportunity to keep growing and scaling is there. But could you unpack what that really means, like in practical terms, and sort of the experience that you've had, and share that with us?
Yeah, no problem. And I think just to build on what Corey and Sarah said, is I think the great thing that I've seen about medical technology, biotechnology, is Australia really is one of the top nations when it comes to R&D of these, these great ideas that have gone out. So, you've got the Cochlears, you've got the ResMeds, but there's been many other companies and many other technologies that have come to a certain point. And unfortunately, the path forward for those ideas and those companies was to sell out to an overseas, an overseas offer, basically, because there hasn't really been a focus, I would say, on creating the scale-up companies. And I think the scale-up companies are the ones that you really, when you look at the manufacturing and how the jobs are going to come, those scale-up companies, when you look at percentages of growth, I mean, we've grown just this year, we've grown, 40%. By the end of the year, we'll just about double. So, and if you've created a path for these scale-up companies to stay here, have the facilities, have the access to skills, and have the support of the government, I think that's really where, these new manufacturing ideas, we can really start putting them into play in a real way and see high value jobs coming back into Australia. Because really, biotechnology, like we talked about earlier, we don't need a large amount of space. We need, I think, the space, the skills, the support, and really R&D. I don't want to be sort of too political, but the R&D tax credit has been, you know, fantastic at getting ideas to a certain point. The key is now how do we take those ideas, these sort of early stage companies, and really foster them into the next sort of manufacturing forces. So that's sort of where it is from my side. So I mean, that probably didn't answer at all what your question is, but
it was a great answer. It was a great answer, and I think I'm going to use it to springboard to the conversation then about, well, then what do we need to do? If there's so much opportunity out there, and I'm throwing this open to all of you, if there's so much opportunity out there and we have these, you know, natural strengths and capabilities, what is it we need to do? Where are the gaps? Are the gaps in policy settings? Are the gaps in you know, funding? Is the gaps in knowledge? Is the gaps in skills and training? I'd love to hear all your perspectives on this, because Colin, you've talked about the life cycle of a company and supporting the scale ups. And we certainly know that, you know, our VC industry has definitely grown in the software development space and is quite sort of, you know, maturing at a rapid rate, but in sort of hardware and in manufacturing, maybe not so much. So could you kind of give us a bit of all of it? What do we need to be doing? Any one of you, I'll throw open.
I can really kind of confirm what Colin's saying. It's the scale up. So once, the Arm Hub has officially existed for 4 months. It's a long time and a lot of development before that, and a lot of work with all the companies prior. But what the demand, as soon as we went public, it's the scale up companies. You know, where can I test? Verton that Sarah's talking about earlier, they exist out here testing and trialing their equipment, and they come out here also because then they get to hang with experts. There's the roboticists and the designers. They're sitting here all day. You know, what do I need? How do I collaborate? But the scale ups are a really important sector to support, because they need to make stuff. They need prototypes. They need room to get stuff out into the market, and they need the skills and the ease in which to do that. And they're not yet of the scale or a size where they can really, afford, manage, sustain a bigger ecosystem within their own business. And so we need to figure out what that ecosystem is that supports them. And so I want to take that forward. So there's always never enough funding, and we won't want to talk about Germany's just massive $80 billion investment. I think it equates to in manufacturing. We'll talk in Australian terms, but I think the government at multiple levels have really been accelerating manufacturing. I think even before COVID, they know, and we all know, that if we can't manufacture things, we are really losing out on the high value jobs and the high value markets that we want to be. We want really to take our whole nation forward. So I think COVID has really just accelerated that. I think we really need to be able to collaborate better, and everybody says it. We need to say, when we say that, what do we mean? And this is something it's our role here at the Arm Hub, but that means, it's open innovation, it's transparency, it's having the right contracting, supply of resources and finance at the right times, making sure you can do good business often with lots of people. We need to collaborate to go faster, and bring those resources together. Speed is really important here. So working with government as much as the private sector to do that. They're the things that are on the top of my mind in that space.
Yeah.
So if I build on some of that, I think that Australia really got a lot better at the early stage pipeline, probably about 6 years ago. So the money started to go a lot more into that early stage pipeline, and I think we've done quite a good job on that. The scale up has been it's inevitable. You mature. We mature in our innovation journey as a nation, and we're realizing, oh, hang on a minute, there's this next bit. We thought we'd filled the valley of death, but no, there's another valley of death. Whoops. And that's where the scale up piece comes. And I know with one of my other hats on at Main Sequence Ventures, we have a fund for the early stage, but also a scale up fund. So, and that's a relatively new piece. I think what I've seen here in Queensland too is that there's been a lot of good roadmaps in terms of what whole industry scale up should look like, but for the whole industry rather than from individual companies. And so that's good to have that roadmap. So at least you know where you need to be heading in terms of where the scale up should be going. So I think I'm a bit more optimistic. I think the it's been increasing. It is a gap, that funding gap. I was yesterday down at the Gold Coast I met a couple of scale-ups there that no one really knows about. So I think that's one thing that we need to do, is actually just showcase some of these scale-ups, because there's some fantastic, like such as you, Colin, great companies out there which we really need to be getting the news out on that. Something I really have been trying to do for a number of years, and I'm going to try and do it. I'll try and do it in this current job, is actually how do we get everybody talking about these companies? So we actually need mums and dads to be going, oh, wow, that's fantastic. Look at that company that just grew. And it's here in Australia. That's jobs for my kids.
Yeah.
So I think we need to bring everybody along on this journey. And that's part of that collaborative piece, Corey, that you talk about, or an extension of perhaps what you're talking about. And certainly these scale-ups of the Gold Coast, they want to be connected to one another.
Yeah.
So I said, great, we'll have a network. We'll talk to you about what you need and how we can make that happen. And they think collectively, they could have a bigger voice than they do on their own. So how do we help these scale-ups be more collective and have that? The skills piece. Interestingly, I've been really surprised at the amount of skills. And I'm sorry to be banging on about Queens now, but I am here now. That's what I've been seeing in the last few months. But there's amazing engineering skills here. In fact, so many that some of them can't find jobs, so they set up their own company. Your Cyborg is one example. They're doing drones in defense. The guy that had a PhD couldn't find a job, kept getting knocked back, so he set up a company. But so that's telling me there are the skills here, but other companies tell me they can't find the skills. So there's some sort of mismatch there. I think, as I said earlier, we need to help people understand they've got skills now that they can use in this future manufacturing. And the other piece, I think, is pilot scale. So Corey, you work in that space. You help me with that pilot scale. I'm thinking about in food, for instance. So when I was back at Cadbury, we come up with innovative ideas, but you needed to test it at a pilot scale. Now in Holland, in the Netherlands, they've got Wageningen, so they've got this fantastic pilot scale facility. But back in Reading, UK, Cadbury was on the site of Reading University because they had a pilot scale prototype facility. So we could come up with some wacky idea and then try it at pilot scale. The other day I was at the Food Innovation Precinct at Cooper's Plains. They've got pilot scale facilities there, but we need more of that. Because it was great to have some bench idea, but then to scale up in the manufacturing perspective, you've actually got to see how does this actually translate into a pilot scale prototype place.
Yeah. And something that you both said there that's really interesting too, and I think, Colin, you touched it on earlier when you sort of brought this whole sort of scale up, let's talk about scale ups and the support they need. The timeframes we're talking about for some of these businesses is really significant to bring a new product to market or to get to the point where they're self-sustaining. And so, I literally sit here and look out over our atrium right now and look at all the businesses that are in here that are at that startup and scale up phase. And, there's such an advantage when they come together and they're housed in one place and they have the assets and the ability to use rapid prototyping facilities that are shared and electronics rooms and, they have shared labs. And then when they do scale up and have the funds and have the means to actually have their own space, we knock down a few walls and we put a lab in for them and we allow them to expand and sustain them through that growth phase. Because I think one of the things that we often talk about is we talk about innovation in this really short cycle and we say, well, Google came around overnight and Facebook came overnight. And actually that's not true. And no significant innovation appeared overnight. ResMed with CPAP was a 30 to 40 year journey to product commercialization, as was Cochlear, as was Wi-Fi. And so when I see what's possible and think about where a company like SpeeDx is they're at 10 years and yet this uptick is up and to the right and they're supplying, the largest labs around the world with the test kits that they're doing, but they're the best kept secret you've never heard of because they're not consumer facing. And so we don't hear about this journey. So connecting those dots to kind of really accelerate both the opportunity, but understand that when you do build these companies, there's a resilience that comes to them. So I want to flip to start talking about resilience a little bit, because I think this is a really interesting one. And we've all touched on it in the context of COVID, but I think it's so much more important to kind of say COVID has highlighted something inherent about these deep tech companies that we're talking about and these advanced manufacturing companies, that when they get product market fit right and they bring a product to market, there's a resilience level about what they do that is a job enabler and a growth engine for the long term. And so I'd like to kind of get people's perspective on that, because I've certainly seen that here. Like, I think if when I hear Colin talk about, you know, we've got a COVID kit coming, you know, that's actually standing on the shoulders of something that was already existing. So it's not like it's a pivot, it's a yes and, not an or. And when I think about Calumino here and their rapid thermo scanner, that was a yes and, you know, it wasn't a pivot, it was a yes and we have a technology that we can apply. So talk to me about the resilience and what you see about the resilience opportunities and why this matters so much as a conversation. And I'm just going to throw that open.
I can give a bit of experience that we've had in this area, and you mentioned it, Sally. So as a company, SpeeDx started as a licensing company. So we have fantastic technology, all invented here in Australia by some great ladies based in Sydney. And really, you know, we had that technology. We pivoted our company within, you know, 5 years. After 5 years since we founded it, and started down the path of developing our own products. So we already had, I guess, credit in the bank in terms of we knew the technology was good, and it was more about how we apply it as opposed to if it was going to be successful. But I think one of the things that we learned quite early on, and I guess to the resilience point, is you have to find the people within the space that can, I guess, can do that can provide the backup to what you're doing. So in our space, we started in sexually transmitted infections, and I have to say, as a group of people, you'll never meet a nicer group of people than the people that treat STIs. They are fantastically open to collaboration, and I think we got very lucky in the fact that they all worked very happily together, and we were able to quite quickly supply something that really mattered in a short time frame. Now, for us, the runs on the board, so to speak, of developing something that then now as we come to supply a product for COVID, you know, we've been able to quite quickly, you know, already have built up a level of trust within the laboratory testing market of the products that we can supply. So I think from a company that's looking to get into this space, you really have to find a way to identify those key people that can really help you build up that sort of customer confidence or market confidence, because I think that is key as you develop as a company, for sure.
I think that's sounding to me a bit more like perseverance, and I think, you know, as deep tech manufacturing 4.0, you just got a lot of perseverance because people don't get it up front. I mean, having said that, when I was at Cadbury, you know, it would take me several goes to get the company to actually take on some of the innovations that we found. I thought I could just get them excited and tell them about it, and that didn't work. So then I thought, right, I'll get a designer to draw it. I'll take that around to the category heads and get them excited with the drawing. And that vaguely worked. But I actually had to get something in their hand. And that absolutely got them excited. But so I think there's this perseverance piece as part of that resilience. The resilience piece I'd like to talk to is the fact the world is changing so rapidly that whatever company, whatever product, whatever service you've got, your resilience is based on your ability to be agile and to keep innovating. I mean, for instance, the radio took, I think it was 38 years to get to 50 million market penetration. Angry Birds took like 18 days. You know, so people are innovating so rapidly that it's not a set and forget. So for that resilience, I think whatever entity you are, you've got to keep innovating. The other experience I had was once upon a time was responsible for an SME that was making mass spectrometers, and they just had the one product line. And I felt so exposed. I thought, oh my God, we've got this company with one product. We actually need a product portfolio so that would help with resilience, because when you're not selling this one, you're selling the other one. And that's something I do worry about in Australia. We've got lots of little companies. I think for resilience, we need to think through that model. What is the business model that works to help with that resilience to get a portfolio? And lastly, on the resilience, I want to jump to sustainability, just because I want to get this idea in here, because I really like it. You asked about what we're really good at. Well, AI. Obviously, there's other countries in the world pouring a massive amount into AI, but we are world leading in some parts of AI. But how about we become the green AI country? So AI needs bucket loads of data. Let's make sure our data centers are all based on green power, and get the green power to really support all of our manufacturing. I think that'll be something very different for us to be able to do and make us resilient.
cracking that energy case in the short term is important too. I often am guilty of thinking that is a long-term challenge, but I think it's a challenge that's now. So it's good to hear you think like that, Sarah. I think it's something that we can tackle and we need to tackle. It's just a bit more systematic and therefore sometimes becomes tricky. When I hear this too, I really think about those companies that seem to do well, and what are the characteristics that we could kind of draw across them. And I think a lot of them are able to really engage multiple disciplines and capabilities in their business and find ways to find innovation in new pockets. So I find that companies that even if they're maybe a med tech company, they're really thinking about the their interactive design capability. They're thinking about what their data's doing. They're really thinking about their marketing, and they're collaborating often on all of those fronts to get what they need. And I think that diversity is really important in a business. So I think structurally as a business, you're right. If you've got one product, you have to really think about other products. But if you've got multiple capabilities, you've got a better chance of actually developing other products and doing better your own products. And I think the other thing I'm starting to see that's helping people get through some of these valleys of death is the way that they're collaborating together to make new products. And often it is in the case we see day to day here, it's SME with SME, or scale up with a little startup trying to do something, or even R&D kind of expert talent. But I'm finding that, so we have a company, BIO5, who we're working with. They do sort of policing robotics, and they're also collaborating on transforming one of their looks like mini army tanks really, but transferring into a wheelchair for disability services to cross country, out in the wilderness activity. This is stuff that's in demand. They're working towards a remit, but then they're collaborating on how to make that happen across life sciences and typical robotics and automation capability. So I'm seeing a lot of diversity in what businesses will consider and how they'll collaborate. I know it comes down to a business case, but they seem to be able to draw in the capabilities that they need a lot more fluently than those that are really just focused on the one thing going forward. So I think that's a bit of a resilience strategy as well, other than being a good collaborator.
Yeah, I think it's I think there's some really interesting points there, and I really take the point about the collaboration and also diversifying beyond being one product, right? If you can think about what you're doing as a platform, I think that's sort of the example that we see a lot of companies sort of being able to add on extra levels of capabilities of what they're doing and bring new things to market far faster. I want to jump into the Q&A because we've got a couple of questions coming through, and they are a little bit, they're not all linear. So we might jump around a little bit, but feel free to jump in, whoever wants to answer them first. So the first one is around challenges of dealing with IP and also venture capital. So, we do have some great, fantastic organizations who do a lot of research, and a lot of money is invested into that research. But navigating that IP path and that licensing deal, and also venture capital, which is not necessarily on the same long-term time frame as what a deep tech company or an advanced manufacturing company might be. What's some tips and tricks and advice in that space? I do think both of them are starting to change, by the way, but I'd like to get the panelists sort of share their perspectives.
I mean, I'm happy to give you sort of our experience in developing to where we are right now. Obviously, as I mentioned, we had a pivot at about the 5-year mark. Our experience with our initial VC investors is obviously been a really good one, because we've been able to pivot without additional pressure for an exit, which is wonderful. I think the access to capital within the sort of the VC landscape, it's always tricky, because you're always trying to align, from a medical device or an IVD development timeframe. We're 3 years if we start a new project. Generally, we're getting much quicker than that at the moment. But if you're just starting out, you're probably at least 3 years from your first product. So aligning the expectations of the venture capitalists with what your reality is from a commercial sense is obviously key. Only just to talk a little bit about IP is obviously having free free and clear IP that you control is key, because ultimately that gives you the most power when it comes to how you commercialize the products, who you choose to license, and then ultimately who you choose to partner with as well. So I think that is something that is absolutely essential and should be a priority before any sort of venture that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Right. I'll go for it, Corey.
Oh, no, you go. Yeah.
So from a VC perspective, choose carefully.
Yeah.
You know, don't just follow the money, because it's so much more than the money. It's what who the partners are, what their experience is, what their networks are, what they focus on. I remember going to Austin, Texas, and asking the startups why they'd gone there. And they said because of the investors here get medtech, they get the sector that they were in. So, you know, choose carefully. Main Sequence Ventures, I put a plug in for them. Obviously, very focused on deep tech. So do reach out to them. Look at what they can add. What will they give you? Will they give you connections to markets, connections to expertise about how to scale up? Have they done it themselves? You know, blah, blah, blah. But also get advice around your term sheet. You know, you can walk in blind to these things and get blinded by these term sheets. Get advice around your term sheet. IP, God, you know, we've been talking about IP for decades, and it still hasn't really got a lot better. And I think it's because we don't understand what IP is. I remember once back at Cadbury, a very, very, very well-known university, we were doing some work with them, and they wanted 20% of our profit. Now, our profit margin was 3% in confectionery. It was like laughable. And I think people don't understand the fact that you've got the IP at the beginning, and then actually the big bit is getting it to market. So really think carefully about what the value of your IP is. And also think about your heading. You know, do you need to patent it, or do you need to just keep it secret? Or, you know, so think through what it is that you're wanting to do. And remember, IP is just an asset. It's part of the asset of all of your other assets.
Yeah, it certainly gets in the way of doing a lot of really good work because it's a topic no one really wants to talk about. But you have to talk about it, and you have to get through it, and it's best to get it right up front. I think what we find here, you know, IP is often, not always, often the smallest asset that you really have. It's like Sarah said, you got to get it to market, and you often have to share to do that. So, I mean, get advice, get strategic, but don't let it hold you back. We also need to think with the companies that are just looking for manufacturing improvement, and they're not going to become, say, a tech company that's reselling robotic vision algorithms to make their robots smarter, because it's unlikely, you know, those algorithms are going to be worth a lot of money on their own. Do they want the IP? If the answer is no, not in a million years, it's really important that you can then possibly freely access a lot of R&D and talent capability without any hiccups with IP, even from the get-go, until you've got something of your own unique IP that's proprietary that you might want to sell. But it's probably, if it's not in the manufacturing improvement part, you're clear of a lot of IP. So just enjoy that moment if that applies to you. Now, if you are a company that, you know, is IP based, and the medical sector is obviously this is their core space, you know, then you do I think need to take the advice that Sarah has really outlined, and I won't do it again, but it's to be able to have that frank conversation. You can get terms that work. You can talk about it and talk it through. And if it's not working for you, go and talk to someone else. Yeah.
Awesome. There's another question here that I'm just burning to get the answer from you of what you think. So I've just decided to pick that one to ask it. But the question is about, would love to have the panel explore the notion of advanced manufacturing and public interest. What are the emerging areas in this space? Lay your wisdom upon me.
Well, I think obviously health and COVID in terms of public interest and wellbeing, advanced manufacturing like Colin's piece of work, you know, being able to have medical supplies, being able to I suppose know that you have some safety there. I think there was actually a federal report, I think it leaked after of COVID, about what level of a manufacturing risk that we have across all of the sectors of public interest, from defence to finance, when something of a crisis comes. And I think they They had done it around pandemics and floods, and it showed the very rapid crisis that the whole country goes into when fatals, or crises happen in all the fatal services. And manufacturing is a really key part of those systems. So that's the sovereignty question, and we are at risk if we don't have the capability, the agile capability in our businesses to do that, and we don't understand our supply chains and in fact what is of value. So I'm sure there's a world of research happening in governments and elsewhere about exactly what that public necessity is. Now, I'm not sure if that's the answer that they wanted to touch on there, but that's what I would be thinking.
Great.
I'd like to build on that, Corey. And for instance, social housing, you can use advanced manufacturing to manufacture houses differently. We've got no clue. We just saw today they're predicting 9% unemployment rate by December. Is that going to get better or worse? We just have no idea. We could be facing some very difficult times. So we should be using advanced manufacturing to help with that. Social housing is one example. Maybe we should think, I really like this model, New Urban Mechanics, the mayor of Boston, within his own department or office or whatever, has New Urban Mechanics, which actually gets the public involved in their own new ideas, and they get to prototype them in their space. So, maybe that's another answer to that question. How do we engage the public in this public goods use? So, for instance, you could use advanced manufacturing for safety and security as you walk around cities. You could use it for food on roofs and sensors around what water, etc. I'm just making all this stuff up, but there's a lot of opportunity.
Oh no, I've got a vertical garden just down here, so.
Yeah, fabulous. But just also touch on, maybe we need to change the social structures so that we can enable this a lot more, universal basic income. Do we make, because we're going to face, with 9% unemployed, what are you going to do? Just give them a small amount of money and say, go away and find yourself a job? Or do we give them money and say, and hey, maybe you'd like to start up a company that can help solve some challenge? And so I think we've got a lot of thinking to do, and I'd like to think we can be brave. Let's see.
I think just quickly on the back of your comments, Corey, I think one of the things I think with the public interest is this concept of pandemic preparedness. And I think because we have so many Australian capabilities that are here, but unfortunately the response that we have is not unified, I would say. So from a molecular diagnostic manufacturing point of view, there's a number of manufacturers here in Australia, and SpeeDx. But I know from a SpeeDx point of view, much of what we utilize as our competitive advantage is this concept of a universal probe. Now, if we knew prior to any sort of potential pandemic that we would be involved in any type of response before it comes here, we can have these probes on hand. We don't have to rely on supply chain difficulties that ultimately have come through and affected our response. But again, it comes, I think, from a more centralized response and preparedness of the government to allow us to do that. As a scale-up company, we can't just take the risk and say, oh yeah, we're just gonna have this ready just in case. I think there has to be a more concerted effort from either the states or the federal or both to say that we need to have these types of manufacturing capabilities in place that, if it does come, we can react.
So I just think it's such a terrible situation if we do not use this moment to innovate in our national supply chains and make critical decisions just like that. And that does require that level of coordination. It does require that level of investment.
Yeah, I love that that whole picture of this is an opportunity not just to respond to COVID, but actually to build up capacity to not just respond in future pandemics, but actually set us in a different path and a different journey, and a visionary one that provides opportunities and capabilities for everyone in society, and to rethink what we're doing and how we're doing it and having the capacity in-house. I'd love to kind of dig into something that we have touched on it, but we didn't quite get there. And I just want to be really blunt. Whenever I sit on a panel and we talk about automation and robotics, I think, you've got to know where this question is going, Corey. Everyone's going to lose their jobs. The robots are going to take over the world. Oh my gosh, what do we do? Can we myth bust a little bit here? And can we myth bust in a way that really actually paints the picture and addresses, you know, what the opportunities are, what we should be thinking about if we're talking about kids and skills, and even retraining and things like that, because some people will lose their jobs if we do automate. And the common answer is, you know, but there'll be more jobs will be created. But let's unpack this and kind of go, well, actually, what is the opportunity? Because I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the jobs and the growth in our businesses here that are resident here during this pandemic. But I think it'd be good to hear that from all of you, because you're all very future focused. You know, Colin, you're growing your business. Sarah, you're trying to grow every business in Queensland. You know, Corey, you're helping businesses grow. So where do you see this, and can you unpack that a little bit and maybe myth bust for me?
Well, I'm happy to kick that one off. It's one I do, you know, I deal with every day, and it's a good one to talk about, because basically robots are not going to be anywhere near as smart, creative or capable as a human at any given time in our near or distant future. Humans still have a great capability. We're very creative. What we need is extra tools. And what robots are tools that help us do some of our jobs better, particularly the ones that we love, the Ds, ready, the dirty, the dangerous, the dull, and sometimes the distant. Distance, particularly Queensland, and everything happens at a distance, it feels like. So these, you know, robots are helping us as tools to overcome some of these challenges. That often they're safety challenges. So we were trying to raise the level of human productivity. So basically the ability in our day-to-day lives, if we're on the manufacturing floor, to be able to do our jobs better with more fulfillment, right? So we are upskilling, but when the Arm Hub really runs projects with companies, you know, short or long, we are spending that time with the expert on the floor who is expert at doing their job, trying to give them the tools they need to bring that into a more productive cycle, a more connected digital cycle. They are learning as they go. They are still the expert. They still know what needs to happen. They know what needs to come out at the other end. Same with the deep tech. They might not have years of experience of running the same company to improve, but they're starting out with the process that they need to figure out how all of these extra tools and capabilities come forward. So to go back to that point, Sally, and you know that, you know, we need to do it, otherwise we're not going to have an industry. But it's not a case of you're going to lose your job. You're actually going to probably have greater job satisfaction. You're going to introduce a more diverse workforce. So suddenly maybe manufacturing in its sort of old-fashioned sort of sense, it still exists. It's not going to be as labour intensive. You're going to have a wider reach of perhaps women in the workforce, able to do a whole range of new jobs, or more open to doing a whole range of new jobs when you're introducing new technologies and new kinds of manufacturing. I think that's probably we do deal a lot with collaborative robotics. I suppose is one of the really important horizons for the Arm Hub, is to take forward collaborative robotics. And this is a case where, again, it's just, you know, how are we helping everybody do their job on a day-to-day basis better? We realise at the Arm Hub, the vast majority of applications for robotics is not going to be full automation. And it may also not be desirable. So some of the companies we work with know, and most companies are getting quite sophisticated and are starting to use the resources available to find out how much really can they actually automate anyway, or how much do they want to automate. So, you know, they might go, okay, my company is probably going to have up to 60% automation. So how does that work? How do I get the skills? And then, of course, there's the new skills and the novel capability that robotics, automation and other manufacturing technologies provide. Like you'll be able to access new markets. You've got novel capability. You're making products you wouldn't have been made before. You're probably able to collaborate better with new companies, you know. So I gave the wheelchair example, but I think about how we talk with our companies with the space sector. How can we help them? We talk to them all the day. Sometimes we provide quality assurance processes like vision technologies to help them monitor their processes. So you're able to do more things and get into more markets as well. So yeah, it's important to be on the journey. Just start the journey. Yeah,
I think that's a great answer, Corey. I'd like to build on it with an ag tech example. So there's an entity that's using sensors to look at pig effluent, effluent, there we go. And that's along the production line, if you like. That's an agricultural food production line where you're feeding the pigs and you want to make sure you're feeding them the right amount of food, otherwise you're wasting money. They reckon that they can make farmers they can save them $15,000 a year. That's not getting rid of any jobs. That's actually making sure that the farmer gives the right amount of food to the pigs. And then, of course, the farmer makes more money, which then he can spend on coffee and clothes, or whatever else that they want to spend their money on. I mean, I know that's a bit of a trickle-down economics example. But then in addition to that, you're building jobs around the sensors. So some companies ought to be set up to build the sensors to do that. So not only are you helping someone make more money, but you're actually, which will lead to more jobs, that you're also building more jobs as they build the technologies. I think the other piece is that the reality is 75% of future high growth jobs need to be in this area. They need STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths, and 65% of them don't exist. So we can sit back and just keep going as we are, and then become a banana republic is sort of a bit of a word people like to use. We can be driving the golf buggies when the rich people in Vietnam who've transferred themselves to Industry 4.0 come over here to play golf, or we can join in. So there's a little bit of the carrot and the stick. But I think the other thing we need to do is just get rid of the fear. We've just got to help people see that this is actually not new. It's going on now. There's Colin, he's doing SpeeDx. They're doing their thing. There's loads of companies doing it right now. It's actually not that frightening. It's happening now. So how do we remove that fear?
Yeah, and I think just last one on that. I mean, from a practical example, we view automation as acceleration. So using still a pretty small team, the automation doesn't actually take jobs away from people that are currently in the company. It just allows us to do more. So, and again, it allows us to do more, develop more products. It's going to allow our customers ultimately to have access to more products. And in a practical sense, we're launching this automation into the market so that the laboratories can process more samples like they need to in the pandemic. And then we need engineering jobs to support. We need all sorts of new capabilities within our company as well. So I think it actually means more jobs as opposed to less jobs.
I love that. I think you've all given some really clear and practical examples. And I think that's what, that's what our goal is with this conversation today, is to unpack it. Because so often when you're talking about manufacturing or, robotics and automation, it's just at this high level and everyone goes, so what? So what does that really mean? What does that look like? How do I translate that to my experience or my industry or me and what I see in my world that I'm living in? And it's so critical that we provide that storytelling. We provide those very relatable and understandable examples of what we're all seeing. Each one of us here on the panel today are really privileged to be able to see so much of that on a daily basis. And I think being able to articulate that to others so that they can actually articulate that on is really, it's almost like we're walking Mythbusters in a little bit of a way. We are coming up to time, but there was just one thing that I think that you kind of touched on. And Sarah, you mentioned it. We've all mentioned it in some ways, but Sarah, you mentioned it then. And it's really about the supply chain for manufacturing and for production. And I think we often, I just want to highlight this, is we often think about manufacturing as the completed product at the end, and we forget about all the components along the way. And so when you think about space and you think about, Gilmore or Myriota and what they're trying to do, they have a whole bunch of things that they actually need supplied for them. And they're not going to build it themselves. They're looking for those companies out there who can do those unique parts and those unique things and those unique solutions. So if we drill even further down, we unearth even more. Given that we're at 1 o'clock and we are at time and I want to be respectful of your time, is there one sentence about the opportunity that you would like to share and leave our audience with today? Sarah, I'm going to start with you because you always have words.
Well, I'm actually going to start by taking a photograph because this is the second panel I've been on in the last week where there's been only one man on the panel. And what I mean by that is it's fabulous to have men on panels, but isn't it fantastic that there are women in these spaces that can talk about this. So my sentence is, let's get more women into this. Let's show them that they can have an impact and there is a place and a space for them.
I love it. Corey?
Come and see it for yourself. So come and do some myth busting for yourself. We find, that you come and have a look and see what people are doing. You'll see that it's so much more doable, affordable, accessible than you might imagine. We know you're busy, particularly for a small company, but pop your head up, come and see us, see whatever's in your area as well, and just start the journey.
Love it. Colin?
I work for SpeeDx, so we are 70% women. So this is just like my every day. So Yeah, I think from our side, I think it's breaking the idea of what traditional manufacturing is and what type of manufacturing we as a country in Australia should be focusing on. So the play to our strengths is
I
probably.
love it. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been a really great conversation. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to those of you watching that have submitted some great questions. I get so excited about this topic and myth busting and hearing the stories about it, because all I see is opportunity. And every barrier that might come up against us or that we might be facing is just an opportunity for growth and for us to actually go around, figure our way around it and how to be more resilient and have more opportunity in this country. So thank you to our panelists. For those of you who have joined us today, we want to just give a quick shout out to if you want to find out more, and I think there was a few people that were like, where can I find out more and where are great stories? Please sign up to our newsletter at cicadainnovations.com. We share not just what's going on with the companies in our space, but we share what's going on that we hear about from all of our friends. So that includes, you know, what Sarah shares with us and what Corey shares with us and what Colin shares with us and other people in the ecosystem. It's in the chat right now. But thank you so much for joining us, and I hope all of you are inspired to go check it out and find out more and see how you can be a part of this opportunity. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sally Ann.
Thanks. Bye.